Come on in, make yourselves at home. We're delighted. Sorry? A room stretcher. Well, we're building a new room over here, so there'll be more room. Or else grab a chair and just pull it in here someplace. There's one over here. Here you go. There you go. There you go. Is what? You know, everything's taken. This morning, there's about 10 different things going on in a building. It's a terrible thing. Too many Jews want to come to shul. I do my damnedest to discourage them, but they, you know, I mean, what do you want out of my life? I mean, you know, we do the best we can to keep them, stay home, you know. They come. What can I tell you? This morning, there's a library minyan, there's a Tat Shabbat, there's a kids minyan, there's this Parsha group, there's a regular service with a musician thing this morning. It's, yeah, wonderful. So this morning, following our Torah study, you're all invited to any of those things. In the Sher Lapati Chapel this morning, we're trying lots of different ways of thinking about prayer and music. So this morning, the prayer will be accompanied by Asher Levy, who's our musician in residence, and by Robert Ian, who's a member of our community, who's a world-famous cellist, sort of jazz cellist, actually. And they'll be doing service with Cantor Barron. There's a Tat Shabbat and a kids minyan, and a library minyan, and lasagna for lunch, and a Torah study group. This week, assuming it doesn't go to a seventh game, College of Jewish Studies on Wednesday night. We're discussing the history of the survey of Jewish history, and this week we begin our discussion of the Bible. So I'm going to attempt to give an overview of the whole biblical tradition in about an hour and a half. No, it can be done. You know, Hillel could do it on 1 foot. I could do it as well. Yes, sorry? What if it does go 7? Well, then we'll put a TV behind me and I'll teach. The good thing about baseball is it doesn't move too quickly. You could learn a lot of Bible, doing pitching changes and timeouts and stuff like that. So there are some chairs there that you're welcome to schlep in, or you could find someone here who looks amenable and have them to shove over. So do we have any more room, any place at all? Please grab a chair and try to come in. Okay. Let's see. So this week, Torah, we also have lunch and learn this week. Yeah, I guess it's the first week, and the youth groups are meeting on Tuesday night. And so Rabbi Hoffman was looking for a way to say it, so he says, we're having a special guest, Rabbi Hal Levine, right? So Hal Levine is going to be here. So they're going to celebrate the arrival of Harav Hal Levine, you know. That's what Jewish kids do this time of year. Then we have lunch and learn is this week. We'll start again. And then next Shabbos is my kids' Ufruf. So we'll have Torah study like usual, and then we'll go into the synagogue, and my kid's getting married, so this is a big celebration. Very small wedding. No one's been invited to the wedding, not even me. Small wedding, small wedding, but big Ufruf. And I think it's enchiladas next week. That's what the kids asked for. So Vlad, find it, get a chair and pull it in. It's okay. Okay, good morning. Everybody well? And Monday, November the 6th, which is a week from Monday night, is our annual event with APAC. APAC is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And APAC is they always bring a wonderful speaker, teacher. This year they're bringing Professor Gil Troy. Gil is a professor of American history at McGill University in Montreal, also a scholar at the Hartman Institute. And Gil is a wonderful teacher. And he's an expert on American diplomatic history, studies the relationship between America and Israel and America and the world over the generations. He'll be talking to us about America and Israel in the generation to come. A very, very wonderful scholar. So that's on Monday night the 6th, and it's free, and they always serve good dessert, so it's worth coming. So welcome. Nice to see everybody. Shabbat Shalom. So we are now on the third Torah portion. If you have a chumash, if you don't have a chumash, find someone amenable who looks generous. It's on page 69. The book of Genesis presents itself as a drama in 3 acts. I have to first, the traditional fooling with the thermostat. Shechianu, v'kiyamanu, lazman hazeh. No, I don't want, there we go. There we go. No. Is it really hot? Now it won't be hot. Now it's on. Okay. So Genesis presents itself as a drama in 3 acts. The character of this drama is somebody named God. Forget what you know about God from other places, because the God of Genesis is not the God of philosophy. It's not the God of religious studies that you learned about later. It's not the God of the prayer book. It's a different God. What we know about this God is this God creates, and this God dreams. And the dream of the Creator, apparently, from the very beginning, is to create a world of oneness. That's the watchword of the beginning of Genesis. And the image of oneness is the garden. And just think for a moment, why a garden? If God wanted to put human beings someplace in the world, put them in a city. Put them in a ballpark. I don't know. Why a garden? A garden is a remarkable place where nature and artifice, nature and design come together. A garden is a place where everything nurtures everything else. A garden is the most exquisite expression of oneness, of balance, of harmony, of mutuality. And God puts this man into the garden, creates this world of oneness, creates one creature. Now this creature is different from all the other creatures, this creature called man, this creature called Adam, the human being, because of all the other creatures, this is the creature who's not governed by instinct. Every other creature in the world is, we would say, pre-programmed, hardwired to behave in a certain pattern. But this creature, the patterns of response of this creature are not determined from advance. The patterns of response of this creature are self-directed. Human is the only self-creating creature in all of creation. In other words, every other creature is programmed by instinct to live in the environment in which it finds itself. The human being is the only one that can freely choose to experience and express and celebrate the oneness of creation. And in that sense, the human being reflects the freedom of the Creator. He creates this creature and he puts him in the world and says, enjoy. But there's another element to that. If you're a self-creating creature, then there is an impulse within that creature toward individuation. No matter how benign the environment that you put that creature in, that creature wants to make it over in his own image, wants to make it himself. And so the human being chooses individuation over being part of God's environment. Every kid does this at the age of 2. The kid looks at you and says, no. You say, what do you mean, no? I brought you in the world. I nurtured you. I held you. I burped you. I diapered you. I feed you. I'll send you to college. I'll buy you a car. What do you mean, no? Right? And the kid says, no. Right? And then the kid says, mine, You say, good, go off on your own, 2-year-old. Go, You ever see one of these mothers lose it in the supermarket and walk away, and the kid looks up and the kid has like this moment of determination, like, should I let her go and like live my life as an independent creature? Here in the cereal aisle of the Ralphs, there's probably enough here to survive, or do I need mom? There's this moment, you look in the eyes of the kid where there's this moment of recognition, like, you mean you really would let me be on my own? Right? And then the kid always screams and runs after his mother, and the mother says, okay, shut up and get in the cart. And, but you have this moment where the kid says, I want to be me. I don't want to be your creature. I don't want to be your creation. I don't want to be shaped by you. I want to be me. That moment of individuation is represented in the Bible as a rebellion against God, but it's really the necessary step for the creation of a fully developed human being. And then what happens in that third chapter of Genesis is that God imposes these punishments, but if you read them carefully, they're not punishments. What happens is these are the consequences of choosing to live an individuated life. One of the consequences of living an individuated life is that you become aware of the possibility of death. And death is the loneliest experience of the human being. If you're not individuated, you never know that you died. Right? It never occurs to you. It's only because we're individuated creatures that death becomes a terrible tragedy. And human being enters into the world, and what happens is we take individuation to its most ugly moral conclusion. Whoa, welcome home. What are you doing here? You're a refugee. Pull up a chair. David's here. He teaches in Portland now. So anyway, so the individuation to its most ugly moral consequence is murder, because it means I no longer recognize my solidarity with the other. I kill the other in order to advance my own interests. I destroy the other, competition. I destroy the other in order to advance my own interests. And at the end of that first chapter, that first act of the drama, God says, this isn't the world that I had planned on. This isn't the world I wanted. This isn't the world that I dreamed about. I wanted a world of oneness. Instead, I have a world of ruthless competition. I have a world of violence. I have a world of murder. To hell with it. I don't want it anymore. Destroy it. Get rid of it. It was a mistake. It was a mistake. And he's about to destroy it all when his eye catches one fellow who seems to have some promise. His name is Noach. So I couldn't create a creature who would freely choose to live in my world of oneness. Maybe I couldn't create one. Maybe I can choose one and give him a different mandate. And the mandate of Noach is not to simply live in the world of oneness. It's to be responsible for that world. And that responsibility begins with the whole building of the ark. After all, what is the ark? The ark is a miniature world. You're going to take two of every kind of animal, put them in the ark, and I'm going to stick you there for 180 days. For 6 months, you're going to have to live in this microcosm world, and you're going to be responsible for everything in this ark. Just think of that for a moment, right? You ever take little kids on a long car trip? You know what that's like? I mean, you barely get out of the San Fernando Valley when they're killing each other in the back seat. You know, are we there yet? Can we stop? I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. He spit at me. He hit me. He's on my side of the seat. And suddenly the whole world is, reduced to the back seat of a Chevy station wagon. That's individuation and living in the microcosm. There's a beautiful midrash. It's a story I love telling the kids. It's a midrash actually, but it becomes a wonderful kiddie story where the ark is now on its way, and the sons of Noah run to Noah and they say, Noah, you got to come quickly. So what's the problem? The lion is about to eat the sheep. So Noah goes down 8 decks and across the thing, and he ends up in the lion's room, And there's the lion sitting at the table with a bib and a knife and a fork and a bottle of A1 sheep sauce, And there is this poor Nebuch, terrified sheep sitting on the plate, and the lion's about to have lunch, and Noah says, wait, you got to stop. And the lion says, what are you talking about? I'm hungry. It's lunchtime. He says, you eat that one, you never have sheep again. There's only 2. And the lion says, what do you mean? What am I supposed to eat? I eat animal. I eat sheep. I'm a carnivore. And Noah says, no, not while you're on the ark. On the ark, you're going to have to eat, tofu, And the lion says, tofu, you kidding me? Like fat, what? I'm a lion. This is my nature to eat another animal. And Noah says, I know it's your nature, but as long as we share the ark, you have to suppress that aspect of your nature. And the lion says, oh, very well. And he agrees to suppress that aspect of his nature. Then the next episode is they feel the ark rocking, and the sons come and say, Noach, you got to come. The elephants are getting playful. It depends on how old the children are in the room. They're playing tag, So he runs down to the elephants, and they're the elephants, and the ark is, and you got to stop. And they say, what do you mean? We're playing. That's what we do. We're elephants, Yes, but if you do that, you'll capsize us. He said, but it's our nature. He says, yes, but you have to suppress that part of your nature. And it depends on how patient the children you're telling the story are, because you can tell about monkeys who steal everyone's food, and mosquitoes who bite everybody. And by the time you get to the end, he's had to go to every animal on the ark and asked him to suppress some capacity of some part of his nature, some constituent element of his nature, in order to survive the journey. And then the last line of the Midrash is, and what part of Noah had to be suppressed? In order to live in this world with some sort of harmony, we have to learn how to suppress parts of our nature, and that becomes the role of the human being, which is to govern this world and to teach the world how to live together in some sort of harmony. The ark becomes, it's a beautiful midrash, the ark becomes a microcosm of the world, and Noach's job is to be responsible for it. That's different than Adam, right? Adam didn't feel that sense of responsibility. He was told to watch the world, but Noach really has to do it. And the ark becomes the pedagogy, becomes the curriculum. So what happens? He comes out of the ark, and the first thing he does is he gets plastered. He plants a vineyard, gets drunk, evades the responsibility, escapes from the responsibility. And once again, God is disappointed. So I couldn't create a man to share with me the tasks, the dream of a world of oneness. I couldn't choose one who would accept responsibility for that world. Maybe I can teach one. Can I teach a human being to become my partner in creating a world of oneness? And that's where we are today. And he chooses a man named Abram. Now, the tradition asks the question, why Abraham? And it's an impulse. I mean, because we're introduced to Abraham in his 75th year. He's no spring chicken. The question is, what did he... So the tradition wants to introduce Abraham by asking what's the prequel? You know what a prequel is? It's the story before the story, right? So why Abram? So there's a tremendous midrashic literature on why Abram. The most famous ones you know. So one of them says, Abram was walking the world and he saw Armon Doleket in Hebrew. Armon means a palace. Doleket is an interesting word. It's a very ambiguous word. It's the same word as Lahadlik Ner Shel Shabbat. Doleket means either on fire or illuminated. You can read the Midrash either way. He sees a house burning. A beautiful, beautiful home, and it's on fire. And he asks the question, is there no one who cares about this house? Is there no one who cares about this house? And the owner of the house, and owner is capitalized, so it's God, shows up and says, this is my house, and this is my house. And he asks Abraham to be responsible with him. The other way to read it is not that it's on fire, but that it's illuminated. It's this beautiful house of light. And he says, is there no one who cares about this house? And the owner of the house shows up. So in one of the midrash, in that midrash, Abraham, it's not that God discovers Abraham, it's that Abraham discovers God. And he discovers God when he looks into the world and wonders, is there no master to all of this? Is there no one to whom this matters? Is there no one who cares about all of this? I would align myself with the one who cares about all of this. That's a beautiful midrash if you think about it. And it could go either way. Is there no one who grieves when he sees the brokenness of the world? And is there no one who kfels, who has joy over the beauty of the world? That's where I want to be. Abraham, who accepts responsibility for the destiny of the world, and God says, if you're prepared to accept responsibility for the world, then you're my guy. And that's the section we're going to begin today. Lecha me'artzecha. Go from your land and be my person. The other midrash, you all know, it's the one you learned in Hebrew school. That Terach, Abraham's father, they lived in Ur of the Chaldees, which was a big trading city, caravan center, and Terach was in the idol business. He was the Ralph Williams, the Cal Worthington of idols, right? I guess that dates me, doesn't it? He was the Auto Nation of idols. How's that? Right? Cars, the idols.com, okay? The Amazon of idols. Which, by the way, is very funny because that means that religion was always the family business, right? And Abraham was all the other brothers had talents. One was an accountant, Epis, one was in manufacture. Abraham was the slouch. He was a philosophically minded child. You ever send a kid off to an expensive private university and he chooses art history or studies, feminist studies or gender studies or... Do you do that? Yeah, and the bills keep coming, and she tells you that you're a bourgeois pig and your values are terrible. Meanwhile, you're still paying the tuition bills, right? I hope you like eating the food of this bourgeois pig, you know. Anyway, so Abraham, they don't know what to do, so they put him in the shop because they say, look, you know, if you can't do anything, you're going to at least keep, you know, do retail, you know. So he's selling idols, and a guy comes in. Remember the story? The guy comes in, a big guy comes in. He says, you know, I have a big project. I need an idol. And he says, well, you're a big man. Let's give you a big idol, you know. And a woman comes in and she's decrepit, and he says, you're a depressed woman. I'll give you a depressed idol. And Abraham realizes in the Midrash that the idols are simply projections of people. And he says to both of them, foolish people, these were made this morning, and yet you bow down to them. And that's where he says this is worthless. So Abraham discovers the emptiness of idolatry, and then the story is he takes a baseball bat and he smashes all the idols, and he puts the baseball, well, it wouldn't be a baseball bat, but he puts the baseball bat in the hands of the biggest idol, and when his father comes back and says, what the hell happened? He says, you see that bowl of food there? This one started eating, and all the others wanted to eat, and they started fighting, and they couldn't, and he killed them all, and that's what happened, Pop, you know? And Terach says, come on, they're just made out of wood and stone. And Abraham says, your own mouth indicts you, you know. You understand, you know. If they can't even do that, then they can't do anything. So the notion of the Midrash is that Abraham discovers God before God discovers Abraham. That's the Midrash, because it wants to establish a sort of pre-story, right? A prequel. In Maimonides' version of it, Abraham looks into the sky and he notices the organization of the natural universe. And he says if the universe has a natural organization, there must be a mind behind this organization. So you put into Abraham the sort of qualities of the religious discovery. You make Abraham a religious philosopher, a religious scientist. The other way to read it, I think, is to read it the other way. I hate to disagree with Maimonides and the entire rabbinic tradition, but I think the whole notion of the story is that he was chosen at random. I mean, the idea of to say, I couldn't create a person to share the world with me, and I couldn't choose one. Maybe I can teach one and take one at random. And they chose him for a really simple reason. His name began with an A. Your name is Abram, you're the first one in line, you know. You, come here. If his name had been Zachary or Mickey or something, he'd have been at the back of the line. He never would have gotten chosen. You know, come here and let's see if we can do something with you. So let's take a look inside. We all together? Yeah. We good so far? Can you guys, can you hear okay? I'm sorry you're sitting outside. Build me a bigger shul. I need another 10, 20, 30 million dollars and I can make the room bigger. I'm waiting. Someone's going to come on to you and say, I'm tired of sitting outside. Let me write you a check right now. It will happen one day. Not in my lifetime, but it will happen. Vayomer, on page 69, Vayomer Adonai El Avram. God says to Abram, Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha is a strange grammatic. It's a strange grammatic construction. It's the doubling of a verb, which makes it emphatic. Like go, you know, it makes it emphatic. Lech Lecha, but it can also be read as Lech Lecha, go into yourself. Lech Lecha me'artzecha, go from your land. U'mimalatecha, from your father's house, mi beit avicha, el haaretz asher areka. Go from your land, go from your birthplace, go from the house of your father. It's three of them. Unfortunately, in the translation, there's only two. It's three. It's repeated three times. To the land that I'm going to show you. And by the way, he doesn't show them. Anyone ever ask for directions in Israel? Never after directions. You're driving and you're trying to figure out how do you get to Haifa, and you pull over and you say, Slicha Adoni, ifo ze derech leHaifa? Derech Haifa? Ein baya. No problem. I can show you. Yashar, yashar, yashar. Go a ways and then ask somebody when you get there. Not about. Yeah. Ramzor Slishit, Yamina, small Yamina, Tishal Mishu. Just make a right, make a left, make a left, make a right, and then ask somebody. Okay? God has the same sense of direction. Like, go. You'll find it, I promise you. And then here's what he says. I will make of you a great nation, I will bless you. And I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Look at this very carefully. This is very important. You know world mythology, and the Bible knows that you know world mythology, because the Bible knows that you've read Joseph Campbell and Edith Hamilton. The Bible knows that you know world mythology, and you know world mythology, and you know that in every mythology in the world this story appears. Same story. The God comes to the man and says, you will be my hero, and together we will conquer the world. And this is what I'll do for you. I'll make you great. I'll make you famous. I'll make you mighty. I'll make you powerful. I'll bless those who bless you. I'll curse those. So the Bible knows you know this story. This is a parody of a common mythological motif. It's a mythological motif that occurs in the mythologies of the ancient Near East, where this came from. It's also in Greco-Roman mythology. It's in Norse mythology. It's in Polynesian, Aboriginal mythology, Native American mythology. The Navajos tell this story. Everyone tells the same story. And the Bible knows it, so it's messing with you. It gives you 2 things, 3 things you're used to, and then it gives you a surprise. Because it's playing on common mythological motifs. I will make of you a great nation. Well, everyone is promised that. Right? I will bless you. Okay, good. I will make your name great. You'll be famous. Fine. Now, the next line occurs in no other world mythology. Because the next line is supposed to be, and together we will conquer the world. That's what the next line is supposed to be. But that's not Abraham's mission. And the Bible knows you're expecting that, so it gives you a completely different task. What do you do for me? Now, the translation here is not good because it's not clear enough. Look over in the Hebrew if you possibly can. Count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, 2 words. Veheye bracha. The word veheye is a weird construction. It's sivui. You will be, better yet, be a blessing. Be a blessing. Your job in the world is to be a blessing, not to conquer the world, but to be a blessing. Now the question you're going to ask is, to whom? A blessing to whom? To whom is this man a blessing? So now it repeats the same idea. Whenever the Bible has an important thing to say, it repeats it several times. That's why rabbis are redundant and repetitious and redundant. Because whenever you have something important to say, you got to keep saying it over and over again, right? I will bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you. V'nivrechu b'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama, and all, literally, and blessed in you will be all the nations of the earth. Blessed in your presence, in you will be all the nations of the earth. So who is the recipient of this blessing? Abraham is to become a vessel of blessing. Who gets the blessing? The nations of the earth, not God. It doesn't say, be a blessing to me. It doesn't say, be a blessing to your own. It doesn't say, be a blessing to your tribe. It says, and it doesn't say, conquer the world. It says, I need someone to be a vessel of blessing in my world, and that's you. That's your job. That's your task. Now, I want you to notice something very interesting about this statement. It's a very sophisticated statement. Look at it again. Why doesn't God just bless all humanity? Why doesn't he just bless everybody with that? Why do you need this guy? Why not just take all humanity and say, be a blessing? Look at it again. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you, and I'll make your name great. You're going to be a distinct tribe. You're going to be a circle. It's particularity. I'm choosing you and your family. I want this one group, this one particularity to carry this sense of responsibility into the world. I tried with the whole world. That was my Noah experiment. He was the whole world. He was the only human being left. He couldn't handle the responsibility. So now I'm going to try with one people, with one community, with one circle. The Bible evidently believes that you can't teach a universal ethic on the basis of universal humanity. You can only teach it to a group of people based on their own experiences, their own memories, their own sense of family. We all grow up in families. And in families, we gain a sense of our connection to each other before we gain a connection to the whole world. We grow up in particularity, in our own circle, in our neighborhood, in our community, with our own circle around us. And it's from that basis that we grow to love all of humanity. You can't teach a person from the very beginning to love all of humanity. You've got to start with one family. But notice, it doesn't say be a blessing to your tribe. You don't end with the family. You begin in the family. The family is the foundation of this ethic. It is where this ethic is taught, but you don't end with the family. This family doesn't conquer the world and rule it all. This family doesn't have dominion over all humanity. This family is not morally or intellectually or financially superior to everybody else. On the contrary, this family is dedicated to blessing the whole world. How do you learn how to be a blessing to the whole world? You start in your own family. Why do you start in your own family? Because everybody has someone in their family they can't stand. How are you going to be a blessing to mankind if you can't get along with your sister-in-law? Ooh. Or your brother-in-law. Or your uncle. Oh, my uncle. You know, I mean, you understand what's being asked here? If you're going to learn how to love humanity, you've got to learn how to sit at the dinner table with the people you can't stand in your own family. If you're going to learn how to love humanity, you're going to have to learn how to love their particularity. I make Shabbos every Friday night. Because I make Shabbos every Friday night and I bless my kids and I have a challah and wine and candles on the table and sing Shalom Aleichem, I completely understand my Muslim neighbor on the nights of Ramadan. Because I make Yom Kippur, I completely understand the days of Ramadan. Because I come to Shul Shabbos and I daven here, I completely understand my Catholic friends' desire to come to church for Mass. Because I have a deep sense of pride in the state of Israel, I understand my Irish neighbor's love of Ireland. I understand my neighbor's particularity because I live in my own particularity. If I lived a universal loving life, I would look down on everybody else's particularity and call it parochial. But I understand that particularity is where we all start. We all start in families. Because I understand my family, I understand your family. And there are people in my family that I'm not as affectionate about. You know? I'm being taped here, so I have to be very nice. Not you. There's people in my family that it takes a little more patience to get along with. I understand what it means. And there are people who, they have a different way of looking at the world. That's how you learn how to love humanity. What's that famous phrase? I love humanity, it's people I can't stand, right? But you love a family, you understand this. So he starts in particularity, but he doesn't end in particularity. He starts in particularity, and that is the foundation of loving the world. He becomes the vessel of love for the whole world. It's a universal ethic that's rooted in particularity. And it's a very important idea because what happens is, in our culture, we have a prejudice both ways. We have a prejudice against particularity. Well, you shouldn't be so parochial, Why do you care about Israel instead of caring about the whole world? Right? There's a very famous argument with Lord Chaim Weizmann was speaking to members of the British Parliament, and the gentleman said, Dr. Weizmann, he's a British scientist, head of the Zionist movement, said, why are you so in love with this tiny godforsaken corner of the Middle East? We could give you any piece of land in the British Empire. And Weizmann turned to the fellow and said, and why is it that you travel 2 hours on the train to see your mother in Sussex when there's a whole bunch of old ladies right here in London you can go see? But that's the point. That's what it means to be particular, to embrace particularity. Yes, it's an impossible country, Israel, but it's mine. It's mine. And so at the same time, I'm in love with it and I'm ashamed of it because it's my family. This is Abraham. So the Bible is going to begin by giving this is God's third opportunity, last chance, to try to save the world by creating a people who carry this tremendous sense of responsibility for rescuing the world, and this need to adopt a sense of responsibility for the whole. Now, before we go forward, because the next piece is really interesting, I want to go backwards for just a second. Why did he have to leave home? Lech lecha me'artzecha. Why? He was in a bigger city. Ur of the Chaldees were a big city. Big city. Why would you go to a wasteland like Canaan? Why did he have to leave home? So I thought I would teach you why he had to leave home, okay? We know why he had to leave home. In fact, here's the irony. We know why he had to leave home better than Rambam or Rashi knew why he had to leave home. We knew why he had to leave home even better than the rabbis of the Talmud did, because we have this piece of paper. Quick story. Ready? Listen carefully. In the mid-19th century, there was a little farmer in Iraq who was farming his land, and his wooden plow hit a very large rock, and the plow broke. And that little farmer started cursing the gods. That destroyed his plow and his chance for getting his work done. So he dug up the rock from his field, and it was a strangely shaped rock, and it had all this scratching on it. And he wondered what the heck this could be. So he remembered that the guy who owns the field next door took a rock like this to a guy in the shuk, and they paid him a fortune for it. He said, maybe I could get someone to pay me for my rock, and I can fix my plow. So the next opportunity, he washed off the rock, took it to the same guy, and guess what? They paid him a fortune for it. Next thing he knew, a whole bunch of archaeologists from Cambridge University showed up and offered to buy his field for an enormous amount of money. And it was such a good deal, he couldn't say no, so he sold them the field. And these archaeologists came with all kinds of crews of people and started digging up the field. And guess what they discovered? Well, the very first human writing was called cuneiform. It was invented in southern Mesopotamia. It was invented in at the Persian Gulf. And it was by a group of people called the Akkadians. And the Akkadians discovered the very first writing. What they did was they lived in the delta of the Tigris and Euphrates. They would take delta mud, put it in a frame, and they would dry it. And just before it dried, they would impress in it with a stylus certain symbols, and that was the very first creation of human writing 5,000 years before zero. Okay? 5,000 years before zero, this is when written civilization is launched. Okay? This kind of writing is called cuneiform. It has an advantage and it has a disadvantage. The advantage is if you have a clay tablet and you've impressed writing on it, it will last forever. It never erases or wears out. The disadvantage is if you're keeping documents on large clay tablets, it's really hard to keep files. I don't know how many of you have a pile of the New Yorker in the corner of your bedroom like I do, but that I'm going to read one day. I mean, I have the New Yorker when the Maccabees won. I mean, but I'm going to read. I'm going to read it. I mean, I'm almost there. Or the New York Times. Anyone here get the New York Times? I used to subscribe to the New York Times until the stack hit the ceiling. And Nina said, either you're going to stop subscribing or the fire department's going to shut us down. You ever save magazines? Anyone ever do that? So or save, anyone save like receipts and credit card bills? And so what happens is the kings of ancient Near Eastern kingdoms empires had the same problem. They were using cuneiform records, and they had all of these documents, and they had nowhere to keep them. So they built an entire city outside of Babel, outside of Nineveh, which today is the town of Mosul, and they built an entire city whose only function was to be the royal archive. Sorry, what? Iron Mountain. Well, something like that, yeah. Right, the royal archive, and the royal archive is what that farmer found under his field. So in 1847, they dug this up, and they found thousands and thousands of fragments of cuneiform documents. If you want to get a doctorate, a PhD in ancient Near Eastern history, you actually don't have to go to the Middle East anymore. You go to the library at Yale University, and you spend 10 years in the basement. And if you survive that, they give you a PhD in ancient Near Because that's what they give you a drawer full of these documents, and you translate them and catalog them and analyze them, and then they hand you a PhD. It's a wonderful way to get a doctorate degree. So one of the things they discovered 7 tablets that contained a myth. And when they read it, they realized what they were holding. This is the ancient Near Eastern creation myth. It was created originally by those first writing people, the Sumerians and the Akkadians. It drifted northward. It got changed and interpreted as the ages went by. And the version that they discovered, there's a big argument among scholars about whether this version is from the 17th century BCE or the 11th century BCE. Trust me, it's old. And basically, this is Abraham's bedtime story. This was Abraham's bedtime story. So I gave it to you in 3 versions. There's a little bit of thing at the top, right? And it's in 7 tablets. You can read this. It's called Enuma Elish. If you Google it, you can find it online, right? When I was a kid, we had to learn it in a book called Pritchard, which is a book of documents. But you can get it. So I gave you a little bit of it. Let's read a little bit of it, and then we'll read the synopsis so you can follow it, okay? When the heaven and earth above did not exist, and earth beneath had not come into being, there was Apsu, the first in order, their father, and the mother goddess Tiamat, who gave birth to them all. They mingled their waters together. Before meadowland had coalesced and reed bed was to be found, when not one of the gods had been formed or had come into being, when no destinies had been decreed, the gods were created within them. Here's the story. In the beginning there was only undifferentiated water swirling in chaos. Out of the swirl, the waters divided into sweet fresh water known as the god Apsu, and salty bitter water, the goddess Tiamat. Once differentiated, the union of these two entities gave birth to the younger gods. So the sweet water god, who is male, and the salt water god, who is female. No, this is important stuff. This is from the delta, remember? So this is the rivers flowing into the delta. This is where you get all the gods, right? So in the beginning there were 2, Apsu and Tiamat, and from them were born all of the gods. And before there was anything, there was water. That sound familiar to anybody? Remember Genesis, ready? These younger gods, however, were extremely loud. How do you like that? Troubling the sleep of Apsu at night and distracting him from his work by day. Upon the advice of his vizier, Mumu, Apsu decides to kill the younger gods. Papa decides to destroy all of his children. Tiamat, anyone remember Sigmund Freud? The war against the father, remember? Tiamat, hearing of the plan, that's Mama, warns her elder son Enki, or called Ea, and he puts Apsu to sleep and kills him. Son offs father. Freudian, completely Freudian, right? From Apsu's remain, Enki creates his home. Tiamat, once the supporter of the younger gods, is now enraged that they've killed her mate. Mama doesn't like it when you kill her boyfriend, right? She consults with the god Kingu, who advises her to make war on the younger gods. Tiamat rewards Kingu with the tablets of destiny, which legitimize the rule of a god and controls the fates. He wears them proudly as a breastplate. The priests of Israel are going to wear a breastplate. Interesting, right? With Kingu as her champion, Tiamat summons the forces of chaos and creates 11 horrible monsters to destroy her children. Now I took this part out, but if you in the tablets you can read the description of all of these monsters. It sounds like those terrific movies my dad and I used to watch on 11 o'clock on Channel 11 on Saturday afternoon. All the giant scorpions and ants and it's a good Jurassic Park kind of thing, right? Ea, Enki, and the younger gods fight against Tiamat futilely until among them emerges a champion, Marduk. Marduk is going to become the patron god of the Babylonian Empire, and Marduk is the origin of the Hebrew name Mordechai, who swears he will defeat Tiamat. Marduk defeats Kingu, kills Tiamat by shooting an arrow, which splits her in 2. From her eyes flow the waters of Tigris and Euphrates. Out of Tiamat's corpse, Marduk creates the heaven and the earth. He appoints gods to various duties, binds Tiamat's 11 creatures to his feet as trophies, to much adulation of the other gods, before settling their images in his new home. He takes away the tablets of destiny from Kingu, thus legitimating his reign. If you turn it over just for a second, I gave you a little bit of just a taste of this, so you can hear it in the original, or the original translated. Apsu opened his mouth and addressed Tiamat. Their behavior, that's the gods, has become displeasing to me, and I cannot rest in the daytime or sleep at night. I will destroy and break up the way of life. The silence may reign and we may sleep. When Tiamat heard this, she raged and cried out to her spouse. She cried in distress, fuming within herself. She grieved over the plotted evil. How can we destroy what we have given birth to? Though their behavior causes distress, let us tighten discipline graciously. So mama says, calm down, we'll work it out. And dad says, to hell with it, I'm kicking the kids out of the house. So what happens is, they go to war and he gets killed, and mama then turns against the children. And mama is fighting against the children. It's Marduk leading the younger gods against Tiamat, their mother. Got it? Tiamat and Marduk, the sage of the gods, came together, joining in strife, drawing near battle. Marduk spread out his net and enmeshed her. He let loose the evil wind, the rear guard in her face. Tiamat opened her mouth to swallow it. She let the evil wind in so she could not close her lips. The fierce winds weighed down her belly. Her innards were distended, and she opened her mouth wide. He let fly an arrow and pierced her belly. He tore open her entrails and slit her innards. He bound her. You got to get into the monster movie here. He bound her and extinguished her life. He threw down her corpse and stood on it. In order to divide the lump by a clever scheme, he split her in two like a dried fish. One half he set up and stretched as the heavens. He put her head in position and poured out. He opened the abyss, and it was sated with water. From her two eyes he let the Euphrates and Tigris flow. So he splits the goddess, and half he puts in the sky, which is why the sky is blue. And half he puts as the earth. And from her eyes, her corpse, come the Tigris and Euphrates. Right? He heaped up the distant mountains on her breast, or as her breasts became the mountains. He bore well. In the north of Mesopotamia are the mountains of Turkey. Those are the breasts of the goddess. He bore wells to channel the springs. Thus the half of her he stretched out and made it firm as the earth. So underneath the earth, the bottom, the earth that we step on is the body of the goddess, and above us is the body of the goddess, and we live in the space between. After he finished his work inside Tiamat, he spread his net, let it right out. He surveyed the heaven and earth. What a great story. I'm surprised no one's made a movie out of this, right? What's the difference between this story and Genesis? A better story than Genesis, don't you think? There's war, there's passion, there's intrigue, there's secrets. There's a great story. Genesis? What? God says, let there be light. There's light, you know. What's the difference between this story and Genesis? Come on, anybody. This is the audience participation part of our game. What?
No God.
There's no God? Well, there are gods. There are lots of gods. There's Tiamat and Marduk and Ea and Enki and Vingu and Kingu and Shmingu. There's no This story is a story about conflict. Genesis has no conflict. Who's the conflict here? First you have the younger gods, which are the gods of all the phenomenon, against the god, the king god, right? And then you've got the mother god against the children gods, right? All this interesting familial conflict, right? All this world of, and everyone's killing everybody else, and they're destroying bodies, and this had to have been a pageant. It was performed. So this must have been very dramatic. In order to make it dramatic, you got to make it gory, right? This is a Halloween movie after all, right? So there's conflict here, there's passions, there's all these disparate forces at war with each other. What do you get in Genesis? Just one God, no conflict. Creation rolls out orderly, peacefully. Creation is a benevolent. It's an artist creating something. There's no conflict there. There's no destruction. There's no war, right? On the one side, you have a world being created out of the body of the dead goddess who tried to kill us. So what does that mean about the world? The world possesses her malevolence. The world still possesses her hate. Why is it so hard to grow crops? Because you're growing it in the soil of the goddess who tried to kill you. Because that's where you live. You live in the body of the goddess who tried to kill you. Why are there storms? Because above you is the body and below you is the body of the world of the goddess who tried to kill you. You're living in this malevolent, angry world. Now there's one more piece of this, which is the most important piece, right? Creating the human being, right? I'll go back to the synopsis. After the gods finish praising him for his great victory in his art of creation, Marduk consults with the god Ea and decides to create human beings from the remains of whichever the gods instigated Tiamat to war. Kingu is charged as guilty and killed, and from his blood Ea creates Lulu, the first man, to be a helper to the gods in their eternal task of maintaining order and keeping chaos at bay. As the poem praises it, Ea created mankind on whom he imposed the service of the gods and set the gods free. Following this, Marduk arranged the organization of the netherworld, distributed the gods to their appointed stations. The poem ends with a long praise of Marduk for his accomplishments. Here it is inside. When Marduk heard the gods' speech, what happens is actually the gods come to Marduk and they complain. They complain that Mama did all the shopping. Mama provided nourishment. Mama, it's Tiamat. And now that you've killed Mama, now that you've killed Tiamat, who's going to provide for us? Who's going to take care of us? So Marduk hears the god's speech. He conceived a desire to accomplish clever things. He opened his mouth and addressed Ea. He counsels that which he pondered in his heart. I will bring together blood to form bone. I will bring into being Lulu, whose name shall be man. I will create Lulu, man, on whom the toil of the gods will be laid, that they may rest. What is the purpose of mankind in this world?
Serve the gods.
To serve the gods, literally, to offer sacrifices, and the smell of those sacrifices nourishes the gods, and now the gods don't have to provide for themselves. They don't do their own shopping. In other words, what are we? We are servants, we are slaves of the gods. We are slaves, subservient. We are slaves of the gods. So how does he do it? How does he do it? Kingu is the one who instigated warfare, who made Tiamat rebel and set battle in motion. They bound him, holding him before Ea. They inflicted the penalty on him and severed his blood vessels. From his blood he created mankind, on whom he imposed the service of the gods and set the gods free. How was man created in Genesis? Say it again. In the image of God. In chapter 1, it's the image of God. The image of God in Genesis is a parody and a polemic against this. Because in Enuma Elish, in the Akkadian myth, you are also created not in the image of God, but from the body of the God. But from the body of the God who tried to destroy you, the God who was put to death by the other gods, the God who was the victim, you're created of the blood of that God and the mud of the river. Genesis comes along and says, no, you're not of the blood of the God and the mud of the river. What are you? You're created in the image of the Creator and given the powers of creation of the Creator. Genesis is a direct repudiation of this story. It was a polemic. It was an argument against this story. Now, myths tell truths in the form of a story. What kind of a world does this myth depict? What does it tell you about your world? It's a map of your world. What does this map tell you about your world?
Violence, chaos.
You live in a world of utter violence and chaos. In fact, if there's peace, if there's tranquility, if it's serenity, buckle your seatbelt. That's temporary, because the natural order of things is violence, chaos, conflict, murder, destruction. That's your world. What's the only thing keeping you alive? The power of Marduk. The power, and who is Marduk? The patron god of the empire. And who is the patron god of the empire? Right? The emperor. He is the son of Marduk. The government, the emperor, no matter how arbitrary, evil, cruel, mean, violent he may seem, he's the only thing holding back the gates of this completely, ridiculously chaotic, murderous world. So you better pay your taxes. You better obey the emperor. You better not raise a voice of protest. You better not question his authority, because he doesn't even have to do anything to you. He just has to withdraw his protection, and that world of chaotic violence will come crashing down on top of you. Tell me about that world. Tell me about living in that world. It's a political myth that teaches, passivity, that teaches obedience, that teaches subservience. It's a political myth that teaches subservience, but it's a metaphysical myth that tells you that you cannot expect too much from this world. You better not expect, don't dream too much. Don't plan too much. Don't build too much. Don't do too much, because, the world doesn't sustain human dreams. It's a chaotic, mean, capricious, violent world. Don't dream too much. It's an intentional effort to lower the horizons of human expectations and human possibilities. Yes, please. It's entirely based on fear. It is a reflection of fear. I look in the world, and fear becomes the dominant emotion of human existence. And the only question is, what do you fear more, the emperor or the forces of chaos that are standing right behind him? Entirely based on fear. Now, I want you to contrast that with Genesis. Go ahead.
Don't you see this all in the philosophy of Hobbes in the 16th century, describing life, the state of nature, as nasty, brutish, and short?
Yeah.
And succumbing to an authority figure as the means of organizing society?
Okay, so what Douglas is referring to is the 16th century political philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who said pretty much the same thing, right? That there's that civilization, that order is a thin veneer over a world of horrible chaos, and the only thing holding that chaos back is the authority of a government. And however tyrannical that government, it's better than the chaos that lies behind it. So what do you know then? Myths don't die. Myths are eternal. They go into quiescence at certain points. They're buried at certain points. They become latent at certain points, but they return. When does this myth return? Whenever societies face massive social change. This was a myth that was created while the great empires of the Middle East were rising. Villages were being destroyed. Kingdoms were being decimated in the face of the great, first the Assyrian Empire, then the Babylonian Empire, then the Persian Empire. And so you have a myth of fear and of obedience and of obsequiousness that lowers human expectations. Then it goes away for a while, and it comes back when the Greeks arrive. Comes back in the 16th century as the Industrial Revolution is beginning. And the world is beginning to change. The Protestant Reformation is changing the shape of Europe. Europe is going through 30 years, 100 years war, 30 years. I mean, the shape of Europe is changing, and you have a man like Thomas Hobbes, right, who says, be afraid, be very afraid. It's an interest, and what does this myth say? Don't try too much. Be quiet. Be small. If you're small, you won't get smushed. If you're small, if you stand up and get visible, you'll get smushed. I think this is an interesting stuff. Now, what does Genesis say about this? Go ahead, Ron.
No, I was going to mention that Exodus seems to be a paradigm, both of this story and the Abraham story, with a human being, Moses, taking us out of all that chaos and the emperor and slavery and taking us to a new life.
Yeah, but it's based on it's exactly right. It's based on an idea That Genesis is an attack on this myth. It is a polemic against this myth. Why? What does Genesis say about being a human being? What does Genesis say about being a human being? Yes?
It's a copy of God. It's a reflection of
You are created in the image of the Creator, which means you possess creative powers, which means you can create a world. It is somewhere, and then that world, the substrata, the material of that world is not this violent chaos. The substrata of that world is a fundamentally benevolent creation. It's a world that welcomes you. And you have been put into the world to be the blessing to that world. Yes, please.
I saw it as Genesis, it was the image of God and the faith of God, versus this, which is the belief in gods.
It's
And you're killing the gods, but in order to go through that chaos, you have to have faith.
so to divide the world into gods means what? It means to divide the world into multiple centers of power, which all compete with each other. And you find yourself in the middle of this terrible competition among all of these gods. And anything you create, they're going to destroy. So the only thing that you can do is to master whatever magic is available, to align yourself with the right gods at the right moment. Otherwise, everything you create will get smashed.
But unless you have one belief, you can't fight.
So Genesis moves away and says, no, there's one benevolent God that creates it all. And if there's one benevolent God that creates it all, then you have a world of fundamental order. And that doesn't mean that awful things don't happen. Awful things can happen. And you can ask, why would that God let those things happen? But that's not the rule. That's not the nature of being. In this world, the nature of being is awful things. And therefore, don't try. Don't step into the light. Anything you do to step into the light. So you have a contest between two fundamental myths. The myth of Genesis and the myth of Enuma Elish. That's why Abraham had to leave home. It wasn't just leaving your residence. It wasn't leaving a place. He was being told to leave this. Leave this world behind. I need you to think about reality in very different terms. I want you to think about your capacity as a human being in very different terms. You can, the only, in Enuma Elish, your role is to be a slave to the gods. It says at the end, the language is great, right? You know, you bring man into the world, a human being into the world, on whom he imposed the service of the gods and set the gods free. You become the slave of the gods so they don't have to work too hard. Right? In Genesis, you become a blessing. You become God's partner in bringing blessing into the world. It's a different attitude altogether about what it means to be human. This is why the Bible went to war against idolatry. You're going to bow down to a rock or a tree. No one's going to tell you that's awful. That's stupid. It's not awful. What's awful is this. What's awful is you start to imagine that reality does not bear the possibilities of human aspirations. That reality crushes hope. That reality is fundamentally antagonistic to anything a human being could ever dream or want or need in the world. That's the idolatry that the Bible railed against. The moment you say, I give up, it's not worth trying, the Bible says that's idolatry. That's the idolatry that the Bible is trying to fight against. It's not, you're going to pray to a tree. So you pray to a tree. Try it, But that's foolish. But this is something much different. This is adopting an attitude toward reality and an attitude toward yourself that crushes human moral aspirations. That's why the Bible was against it. What? Yeah, but now Qohelet is this. The beginning of Qohelet, because what did Qohelet write? He wrote as Alexander the Great and his followers. There's music in the air. The Lord is calling. He wrote as Alexander the Great crushed village cultures and changed the landscape of culture and politics in ancient Near East. Again, when you're living in a world when this power is beyond your control, you tend to revert to this myth. You say, I'm small, they're big, there's nothing I can do about it. Maybe I'm crazy, and I will admit this fully. Does it seem to anybody interesting that the only successful movies in the movie theater now are movies about superheroes? The only movies that are making any money are the Batman and the Superman and the Spider-Man and the Ant-Man and the Flash and Thor and Iron Man and Wonder Woman. We got a lady in there, thank God. And there's soon going to be an Aquaman coming up as, and if not an Aquaman, maybe teal or turquoise man, I don't know. What does it mean? What does it mean to have those as your mythical cinematic images? It means ordinary people can no longer control the conditions of their own existence. The evil that infects us is now is too powerful for us normal people to fix it. We need Superman, Batman. We need superheroes. I think there's a deep unconscious reversion to this myth again. You need Marduk to come and save you. I don't know why no one's made the Marduk man story, but I'm sure there'll be somebody who will. Yeah, Douglas, yeah.
In political philosophy class, as soon as you finish reading Hobbes, the next unit you start is John Locke.
It's Locke, right.
And with Locke you say, you have God-given rights of life, liberty, and property.
Yeah, and that government is the power of the consent of the governed.
Which then manifests itself
In Jefferson.
Yeah, sure, which is the
Right.
philosophical basis of this society.
Yes, Jefferson, and then Hamilton said not so quickly, and he's the guy that got the show written about him. And I would have written the show about Jefferson, but that's me,
It's the philosophical basis of this society, which is why
Right.
you see in America so much.
And John Locke was a much more religious man than Thomas Hobbes. John Locke was a deep believer in the Hebrew Bible. So were the founding fathers.
Around the time of the Glorious Revolution.
So were the founding fathers of this country. Because the idea that a bunch of guys can get together in a Philadelphia courtroom and figure out how to run a government was completely unheard of in the world. Like, what? Right? That is an assertion of human moral aspiration against a very chaotic world. And George, as crazy as he might have been, King George across the ocean said, no, I am the sovereign. And he had the Navy to prove it, This is the contest. This is Lech Lecha. Why did Abraham have to leave home? It's not that he had to leave home. He had to leave this. He had to think of the world in different terms. Yes, please.
So it seems that, to go back to your original question, what's the difference between Abraham and Noah? It seems that Noah's getting drunk and the end of his life is almost an agony over his complicity in the destruction of the world.
Yeah.
Whereas Abraham took a dream and he might have left home, but he wasn't complicit that his charge was to dream big.
It's a good question. Is it Abraham's complicity in the destruction, or Noah, is it complicity in the destruction, or is it just that he was a personality not prepared for the awesome responsibility of being a blessing to the world? I mean, think about being a blessing to the world. You'll see this in the Abraham story, by the way. We didn't get into it. We have another 2 hours. We'll do this. The next story is Abraham goes and does something like really small. He goes to Egypt when he's not told to go to Egypt. He's told to go to Canaan. He gets to the border of Egypt. He says to his wife, you're too pretty. They'll kill me. Tell them you're my sister. So she tells him they're his sister, and Pharaoh takes her into the palace, right? Takes her in the palace. And then when Pharaoh finds out that she's the wife, not the sister, I mean, it's a small thing. It's like, why are you being so small? You're Abraham. But you see, even Abraham is struggling with this role. What does it mean to struggle with the role of being God's blessing in the world? How does an ordinary mortal human being struggle with that role? Part of it is he's a bigger man than Noah, and I think the opposite is equally true. I think God understands you got to be a little patient with these guys. Abraham has to grow into the role, right? And then after Abraham God's still waiting, by the way, for us to grow into the role. No, I'm serious. God is still waiting for us to grow into the role. God's very patient, still waiting, hasn't given up on us yet. Next week, we will see what happens to a man charged with being a blessing to the world. Have a really good Shabbat. Take good care.
Who are those ballsy Jews 4,000 years ago?
That's it. That's the question.